Hey everyone, Scott here. Well, I'm back in Space Engineers, and this week we are going to be building a capital ship in survival mode. I'm going to go through the steps, and we're going to show you what my thought process is throughout this thing. And this ship is basically going to be designed to be an industrial ship that's going to replace the platform in the survival mode that basically does all our refining. We'll be living off this ship. Now, I've started with the easy start one world option where you get the big red ship and the big blue ships, and I've actually ground up the big red ship to start with the parts for this particular ship. The thought process was, the first thing we did was get core functionality on it. We built the front section to house all the industrial components, the refinery, the blast furnace, the assemblers, as well as power. I was also going to put a drill head on the front of this just so that it could do all its own mining. But as time goes on, the design will evolve and things will change. Now, this is also a multiplayer game. I've got a total of 3 additional friends with me to help me build throughout this particular ship. We named it the Sevastopol because one of my buddies has actually been a huge fan of the Alien Isolation game that came out recently, and fan of the Alien franchise in general. So you may see a couple of references to that throughout this game. Anyway, so as you can see here, I'm going through and I'm starting. I built the interiors first. I started with the inner decks, and they each had to be sort of a function. I've got storage and refinement in the what you can kind of see is the nose of the ship right now, although it is very incomplete. I'm working on the nacelles and things of that nature, working out the plumbing, and basically trying to get this thing going. Now, as you can see here, you can kind of start to see the shape here. Buddy's working on the back end, and I'm building in decks as we go. Now, I'm doing light armor blocks for most of the interior as blocking, just to kind of get an idea of how things are going to be. We are going to try to do some ship docking on the back of this, although I'm not going to have a dedicated hangar because I don't believe the ship will be big enough for that. But that's kind of the general plan, as you can see unfold here. Some of these light armor blocks as we go will be removed in lieu of other components that will need to be placed. But I wanted to get the feel of the ship down first and basically just have everything set so that it was laid out logically, and I could get the conveyor system tied into all of the inventories and assemblers and or docking ports that we would need in order to support a ship of this scale. So as you can see here, we were going to add some ships on the back. Still kind of working that detail out at this point. This whole build took us approximately a week to build of evenings. I don't have an exact hour amount because I mean it did vary, and we did have some minor distractions as we went. But we'll get more into that later. So now I'm just kind of putting things together here, trying out a few ideas. I'm still relatively new to Space Engineer, so I'm still figuring things out as we go. That's expected of everyone, I assume, just based on the fact that this game has a lot of complexity. Also, what else I found is when we were building in survival mode, I mean, it was really a lot of fun just kind of working out problems with my buddies. Like, we had a couple of guys here, I'll mention them now. There was Tyson.Powered, who you've seen following me in the ship, who's a good friend of mine from a long time ago. Another buddy of mine goes by the name of Drayden_R. For Steam Aim, I've known him for several years. And I actually had a new friend join me in this build by the name of Raven Knight, who was a viewer of mine who reached out to me on my last episode and asked if he could join in. We've since struck up a bit of a friendship, and all these guys have been just invaluable to me to help kind of get this ship going in terms of labor distribution and ideas, and just creative input really helped a great deal. So I put in a chair in here, this is where the first bridge came out, but I kind of realized sort of after we were building it that it might be too low on the ship. So that actually raised the bridge up a fair bit. As you can see here, we're just starting to put the underside of the bridge together. I've got the skeleton of an antenna on there for communication, gyros, and the plumbing to actually run the conveyor system up there. We do develop this idea as we go. It's a very iterative process. You start, try an idea, see if it works. If it doesn't work, try something else. That's kind of how my thought process is. It was the same when I was playing the Kerbal Space Program series. I would try something. If it didn't work, I'd try something else. I don't get discouraged. I don't worry about it. As you can see, you can start to see something forming. You may not be exactly as you envision when you start, but it still will probably end up cool and works really well. Now we're just getting everything together here, also having to, again, in this game we are procuring all of the resources as we need. If you notice the blue ship in the background there is missing all its engines, is because we ground them out for the parts when we needed them. So it's actually, I think this is kind of a lot of fun. I see a lot of people on YouTube that do all these wonderful creative builds, but they're in creative mode, so it's, you know, it's great just for trying out ideas, but this is actually what I find survival makes it a hell of a lot more interesting to me, is because you have to work out the problems of survival. Now, survival in this game basically just means you can't let your suit run out of energy. So, fair enough. That means you have to keep enough fuel in your reactors, or you have to have solar panels or some sort of power generation, and right now the only two methods in the game that I'm aware of are nuclear reactors, which consume uranium, or solar panels, which generally will keep you charged, but generally don't produce enough energy to refine all the components, so, or the raw materials, excuse me, the ores that you pull out of the asteroids. So you have to kind of have all of these sort of ideas discovered and sort of have, you know, a good supply base going on here. As you can see, the ship is again building the interiors out of light armor blocks just to get the shape, because I can easily pull those out if we need them. Cheap on resources and all that kind of stuff. I do want to have the ship cladded in armor, because if we're working around asteroids, there could be the potential of asteroid debris hitting it and causing problems, so this will get a layer of armor towards the end. If I think you actually can start to see the armor getting placed in some places already. We had to take this out for a quick spin when it was just a frame, just to make sure everything was working, and we ran into some issues with rotors and pistons that were causing some strange collision effects, but hopefully those will get fixed as the game progresses. It is still an alpha build. It's still going to have some issues and problems and stuff of that nature. As you can see here, I'm just checking to see if I run out of steel plate, because quite frankly, you need it to build stuff. So what I would recommend to anyone who's trying to do anything in survival is the first thing you should build is some kind of a utility ship. You need a way to get resources, so you're going to have miners. If you do the easy start, you're going to have a couple of pre-made ships that will really help with that. I designed this grinder/welder ship quickly in survival, just to kind of help me procure stuff. As you can see here, I'm grinding up more bits of the ship because I did not have enough steel plates at this point to finish the job, and even though my manufacturer was producing stuff, it still wasn't producing it fast enough to keep up. What I ended up doing one night was, once we had the entire industrial ship working in self-autonomous and had enough fuel to go for several hours, if not days, I left my computer going all night one night just to produce parts. And what we did was we put the assembler on, produced one part of what I needed on an infinite loop. So it was like one steel plate, one steel tube, one large steel tube, one thruster component, etc., etc., and it just did that on an endless loop, so it would build those parts one by one as long as we had resources. And you'll see here, pretty soon I was getting to the point where the mining wasn't keeping up, so we had to start developing a mining system, or at least a ship that would do a lot more mining than the little sort of starter ship that we had. I built one that was a little bit bigger, that was still technically a smaller ship, but it had a bit of a mishap and basically exploded randomly one day without me there. I don't understand what happened. Just grinding away here to finish this off, this blue ship. I consumed most of it until I filled up the hole with what I thought I had enough for a little bit. Again, I kind of like the easy start for now, because this capital ship was my first one. Easy access to parts, stuff like that. If you go in some of the more harder survival modes, it's a little bit more difficult, because you don't start with things like meta centers or refineries, or you usually start with a refinery of some sort, or at least the ability to build one, because if not, you're kind of boned. Things like that, or you can start in the starter ships that they sometimes provide you, which do provide you with enough to stay alive. But yeah, you kind of got to have at least one refinery, one assembler, a way to power it all, that kind of stuff. I was thinking perhaps, and this is just an early thought, I'm not really so sure if it's going to happen, but there's a good chance it will if I really do enjoy this and the people that have been working with me really do want to keep going, is I might try to do a couple of more larger capital ships in a survival setting, because I really think that is kind of cool, and I haven't really seen much of that on the YouTube. So when it comes to these builds, I see a lot of guys that really have great ideas, they throw them out there, they're all done in creative, so it's no real consideration for the resource procurement side of it or anything like that, which is fine if that's your thing. That's one of the reasons why, you know, I really enjoyed Kerbal Space Program, and now by extension Space Engineers, was because it provides you with a challenge to overcome and a kind of an economic sort of development game. I would like to, like, I hope that doesn't come off as strange, but like, I do like the economics of games in terms of things like that. I still consider to this day one of my favorite games of all times was the original Privateer that came out of Origin, because that was one of the first games I ever played when I was a very young kid, actually, that introduced me to the business of running a ship. And that's, if any of you guys are following the Star Citizen project from Chris Roberts, the same guy who did the original Privateer, which I can still consider to this day one of my favorite games ever. That game is a space simulator sort of thing, but it's got a huge economic portion to it, and that kind of stuff interests me. Like, how much does it cost to run this ship? How much, you know, material do you have to bring in order to break even? How much do you need to bring in to pay your crew? You know, how will all that sort of stuff play out? And as much as I love being a pilot, I also like the business side of stuff a lot, and I really do like that in this game. Like, I mean, it's pretty much a really procure resource, refine resource, use resource kind of economic system, so it's very, very simple, but it's still there. Now, as you can see, we're moving on here. I'm just starting to put solar panels on the ship. I kind of moved them around a bit. I took them off the platform because we were consuming the platform for parts as well. I wasn't going to have any need for it at the end. I was going to live autonomously off this ship. But I threw them on there to kind of offset the power consumption of the refineries and the assemblers, because they do consume a fair amount of stuff, and we were finding we were going to be needing more resources. So I was hoping that just by slapping them on the ship, they would do enough energy generation to kind of offset our uranium consumption a bit. And to the most part, they did work. But we'll get more into that as we go here. And as you can see right now, my buddy's like, uh-oh. He lost his drill because he was using a merge block and he didn't lock it into anything else, or like we had to go back and catch it. And the following kind of funny situation ensued, so I'm just going to let you guys watch this, and we're going to just go to some silly music where I'm going to speed the video up to about 4 or 5 times just so you can see what happened. Unfortunately, we couldn't recover the drill head. It was just bouncing around too much, and I couldn't get enough control of it to really recover it, and we couldn't put thrusters on it because we didn't have the parts. And anyway, we decided we just ground it up for its components in space, and then we lost some of the raw material that was in it, but fortunately it wasn't anything too devastating. Getting back to the ship here, we're just going to start putting together things. I took the drill off the front nose of it because with the skiff that we were building, that was kind of doing all the mining at this point, and it was probably doing a much better job than I could have done with this ship, and thus not having to risk it. I put a bit of a catch on the bottom to catch some of the raw ore, but we'll get more into that as you'll see later. And now we've built a new drill assembly. It's a little bit bigger to provide a little bit more of a hole to get the skiff through, and this was Ravenite and Drade and R there both kind of came up with this on their own, as well as you know, kind of come up with the whole mining system, and Drayden is especially responsible for mostly resource procurement of this particular build because he kind of focused on that, whereas Raven was really great at providing me with some insights because he's a veteran Space Engineers player who's been playing for, well, when he messaged me, he said he'd been playing for about 700 hours. So I decided to take a little break from building and just see how this drill head works, so I decided to ride down on the front of it. We do have a gravity generator in the skiff that points forward, so that all the material that comes off the drill still kind of falls down in front of it, which helped to kind of collect a little bit more of it. We didn't lose as much to space debris as if you didn't have, say, a gravity gen. And this was kind of cool because that means I could actually ride on the front of the nose looking back without any jetpack to stay on it. So that worked out really well. Got the front more or less how I wanted it, so we started to enclose it. This became more of a situation of building armor blocks and fitting. As you can see, we added a bit more storage. I've added a bit more refinement capability to it to kind of get going with the speed of things. We've got arc furnaces, we've got refineries, and we've got more assemblers to kind of build faster and faster, because as we were consuming resources quickly, and that was to be expected, and I just needed a system to keep up. So we were going to, you know, this is going to be an industrial ship that, again, we named the Sevastopol because I believe it was an industrial ship as well. And, you know, you may see a couple of more alien references as we go here. Just because, again, we're fans. Now, you're getting another nice good shot of it. You can start to see the nose is getting bigger, and it's going to encompass all that. You can see we've got thrusters in there, and basically starting to build up more of the interiors or fill in the exteriors so that the ship is solid and can get more complete. Again, this ship, part of the reason I wanted to build an industrial ship and not focus on, say, a battleship or something like that, was it would be easy for us to use the ship to build more ships. And I think that's a good way of looking at it. I mean, I'm still putting some defense systems on it, point defense, Gatling turrets, missile launchers, things of that nature, but I don't intend to take it into direct combat unless I have something else to replace it. I did put cargo ships on this particular survival game because, as you can see, there's a mining hauler that's off to the distance that's getting about 4,000 meters away. I did put those on there because I did kind of like the idea of being a bit of a pirate and overtaking them and potentially salvaging them prematurely for parts and or bounty and or energy. So at some point I may get into that. That might be another capital ship build at a later time where we build a ship that's strictly for overtaking that. I wouldn't mind getting into some of the multiplayer stuff too, like beyond just cooperative building. We'll see what happens. I don't want to get too much into that right now because that'll depend on what comes down the pipe for me in terms of time and friends and what, again, my buddies want to do, because I totally prefer the social side of gaming. I like hanging out with my friends online. A lot of the friends that I do have online are people I know in real life who have been my friends for many years, since I was a kid in school in a lot of cases. And, you know, we just work really well together. And I do enjoy that aspect of it a great deal. So now I'm just, again, welding the interior. I built this really tiny welding ship just to kind of get into the really small places, because I was finding there was lots of nooks and crannies that I was building into that I couldn't actually get into with my other one. So we started building that. Plus, on top of that, it became apparent that one of the things we had to do in this game was everybody kind of had to have their own utilitarian ship in order to really be effective. You know, so Raven Knight built his own, Tyson got mine, Drayden built his skiff, the bigger skiff, and he also built another utilitarian ship that was covered in welders and grinders too. That was kind of the big hefty one that did a lot of work for us as well. This particular little one didn't last very long because apparently once we welded up a Gatling turret, which unfortunately I wasn't there for and therefore didn't catch on video, as soon as there was an ownership problem with the build this last week, and as soon as this welding ship finished building a Gatling gun, the Gatling gun opened fire on it and destroyed it. And I was like, that sucked. And I was actually more disappointed in the fact I didn't get that on video than I was about losing the actual ship and all its contents. So, oh well, stuff happens. I mean, I just kind of wish I was there for it. In any case, I mean, it all worked out well. We built another one. As you can see here, we've got more small ships being constructed and used to help speed up the build. This particular gray one was Raven Knights that he designed to to basically focus solely on welding the exteriors and stuff like that quickly. Whereas some of the ships I built, like the grinder, the black one that I had that had several grinders on the back, I liked keeping the nose on that one small so that I could weasel it into a few tight places, but there was a few places that it was just a little too tight for it, so I built this smaller one, which unfortunately didn't last. But yeah, I think if anyone is interested in getting in on some of my games, again, feel free to message me. That's what Raven did, and we'll see what we can do for you. But I think one of the requirements is one of the first things you get, or you have to do, is build your own utility ship, because that just kind of worked out really well for everyone to kind of have something to store parts and build things with. In any case, yeah, we're just having a grand old time, joking around, getting along. It's been great. I've been really happy with the results of this ship thus far. Considering it's the first one, I expected more problems, but that wasn't the case. We did run into a few problems, but nothing that I would consider crippling or groundbreaking or anything too terrible. It was just a really good, fun experience, and we spent most evenings this week working on it. There was so much footage of us building it that I was not able to actually put all of it into one video. I originally thought that, you know, this build might be one complete video, but it turned out that there was just, even with me editing it down and closing some of it up, was just too much footage. So we're going to continue to do it. I cut this one into the first half hour. I'll do a second part next week on this finish, and you'll actually get to see it complete, as well as various tests we did with it. I'm not going to spoil too much, and yeah, you got to be careful with those welders, because I just zapped myself and nearly killed myself, and then I run into the elevator shaft and just about killed myself, and then I run into the floor and killed myself. So anyways, yeah, just silly little mishaps. Lost a few resources, but nothing that I would consider the end of the world. And I went to turn something off here just to... That spherical gravity is what kind of screwed me, because I was putting a spherical gravity generator over top of my little sort of catch bin on the bottom. My poor body. Start poking at it. So anyways, yeah, be careful, because I didn't have my jetpack on. I fell out of the ship, and then I fell into the ship, and gravity can do some strange things to you. Yeah. See, I flew the ship in here just so I could build those shafts too. Again, this little ship did serve me for the short time that I did have it. It all worked out fine in the end. One other thing I wanted to mention, I probably should have mentioned this before I even started recording, was I'm actually using some new video editing software. I'm giving it a trial run here to see how I like it, and if I do, I will probably move over to it, because I was using a free version of Windows Movie Maker, which was probably painfully obvious to anyone who's ever done any video editing on previous shows. But again, it was free. But I finally got fed up with some of its limitations and or issues and or more issues. So I'm upgrading. I'm actually enjoying being a YouTuber and putting videos up, even if they, you know, might not be hugely viewed. Anyway, I am enjoying it, so I'm going to do it. And now this is a test of that new drill that they developed, or it might have actually been its first major run, because we were collecting resources, and I came over to see how well it was doing. And yeah, I need a little more oomph to get it through on occasion, but it did work fairly well, and we've actually updated the skiff name there. If you notice, another reference of some previously unmentioned franchise that has been very successful over the past 30 years. So anyways, yeah, just eating those resources up. And the thing I love about Space Engineers is, even though you come up with a good solution, you can always usually figure out another one that works just as good, if not better. So now I've kind of done another sort of view of the ship, and you can see everyone's kind of doing their thing and working on it. We've got lots of little ships supporting it. I've got more energy being developed in the back. The bridge is enclosed. We've got, you know, you got something that you can kind of really starts to feel good. Again, with the addition of more inventory space, more plumbing to support other components, as well as things like storages and stuff like that. Trying to keep it all interconnected so it's easily accessible and produced, or able to basically work as efficiently and as quickly as possible in a lot of ways to basically just, you know, allow us to do what we want to do. Again, filling in some of the dead space inside the ship with light armor blocks to prevent weight. We don't need that much heavy armor. I'm just skinning the outside of it. In hindsight, it might have actually been a little bit of overkill with the heavy armor exterior, but I want this thing to survive. It helps. It'll keep us alive in the long run, and as long as it has energy, it'll keep producing. And we also have to keep in mind that it's going to be carrying some smaller craft that are going to help support it in its roles. If we do decide to overtake other ships, this ship is not going to be very fast, unfortunately, to overtake them. So we just keep working away here, and everyone's doing those things. Raven's kind of working on his ship because he had a minor problem that he had to adjust. All part of the game. He's hacking into it because because he died and came back in one of the rescue ships that you get. But that also kills ownership to anything you've already had, so he's basically got a ship that he can't access, so he's got to grind it out, or hack it, as the game term goes, to get control of his ship again. So I'm just continuing to work on the nacelles, start to close them up a bit, just so that I can get a final idea of how they're going to work. The plumbing inside there is going to support some welders that are going to work as an automated sort of repair system. However, I'll get more into that. And on top of that, I'm going to have some combat Gatling guns and missile turrets coming off the nacelles to kind of help protect them a bit too. But that's at the end of the build. Right now, we're just working on interiors, trying to just make this thing as awesome as I can. Developing it more and more into what I consider a viable home ship, and it's been, again, very good experience for me. So just going on here, just kind of rambling on as we finish off this video, but as of the time of this video's production, Keen Software House, the company that actually makes this game, has announced that they will be going into a bug fixing period, which should correct a lot of the multiplayer issues. And yeah, we ran into a lot of multiplayer issues when we were playing this. Sync issues, problems, just a bunch of things in general. Again, I gotta stress, this is alpha software. It has been playable, and I believe on Steam, for nearly a year, but if not more so. But again, this stuff's in development, and this is, again, kind of the thing that comes back to me, and what I really appreciate about the indie development is, even though this game is, you know, by far not complete, it's still very playable and enjoyable. AAA games that take 2 or 3 years to come out by big companies that I have really very little respect for anymore, for various reasons, still produce crap by means, and I mean, they're the same game over and over and over again. I just cannot stand anymore, personally. I don't want to play anything on consoles anymore. The Xbox One's launch was awful, and I'm not going to say that PlayStation was probably better, but I still don't see any value in it for the new PlayStation or anything like that, so I don't do any of that gaming anymore. So anyways, getting back to this, we've got our little ship. We've dug a hole out of the side of it because we decided to expand our refinery capability one more time to support more production, because again, we were finding that we weren't producing the ore as fast as, or we weren't refining the ore as fast as we could produce it, and therefore it was holding us up a little bit in terms of building. At this point, we had a fair amount of resources, because I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but one night I just left my computer going with my refineries just going and my assemblers just going, producing parts, because we got to one night where we just basically ran out of stuff, because it was all in raw ore format and wasn't refined and wasn't produced into usable components. So the one night I just let the computer run overnight, and we just kind of let the refineries and the assemblers go overnight and just keep producing. And as such, the next day we had plenty of resources to continue the build, which worked out fairly well. Yeah, so we're just coming in here, still working on where we're placing stuff. As you can see here, I've added a couple more reactors to support the this was added a little while ago, but you can start to see I'm covering the reactors so that they're protected, and that kind of became our engine room. Another view of the bottom as I start to armor up the base and get prepared to basically put the final touches on it. But truthfully, at this point, I'd almost consider us maybe not quite pretty close to halfway done at this point, because the aft section was still, for the most part, unfinished and basically just there that we had to talk about and figure out what we were going to do with it. And so anyways, we're moving forward here, just trying to see. You can kind of see in the nacelle on the bottom there that I kind of came up with a system to feed welders that would kind of auto repair, in the sense that if we ever needed it. That system I thought was pretty good, but it was also very involved in order to make it work. Basically, you had to have pistons feeding welders with docking ports, and we did test it. It did work, but in the next video I'll show you why that became completely obsolete, and before this thing even left dry dock we were retrofitting it. I love that kind of thing though, don't get me wrong. Alright, well, coming up closer here to the end of the video, so there's not too much more. I'm going to end this video off with this portion of it. I hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you have any ideas or suggestions, feel free to comment, or let me know, send me a message. I'll put all my contact information in the YouTube comments. But yeah, I mean, share your ideas and thoughts, suggestions, comments, concerns, questions. I'm always available for it. I do like to get involved with my community, or get involved with my viewers and take some of their suggestions, and it also gives me ideas for future content. So anyways, this is Scott Cook. I'll see you in part 2 when we finish the Sevastopol.